So today we begin with rotational dynamics. We have already seen some form of rotational motion. I think we looked at circular motion at some point before. And then in the last chapter as well, when we looked at the center of mass, we talked about this. But just let me recap very quickly what we have been doing so far. So we started this course, of course, learning some mathematical tools in like integration, differentiation, and some vector properties. And then we really focused on learning new quantities or focused on describing the motion of a point particle without paying much attention to what was causing that motion. And then next, and then that part we called kinematics, but that was uh, kinematics of point particles. And then we generalized this idea and we brought in the causes, what the agency that makes objects move or stop, namely the force, and the relationship between the quantities that quantify or describe motion, for example, the position or rate, time rate of change of position or time rate of change of velocity, those quantities and how they were related to force using the Newton's laws of motion. And then we studied point particle dynamics. Okay. Then we generalized this idea further that point particles, real life is not about point particles. We have bodies and objects which have finite size and finite shape. That means we cannot simply be using a point particle approximation of objects that we have been using before. And when we try to generalize, we learn something new, namely the center of mass and how to calculate it, or the conservation of momentum, for example, and how conservation of momentum can be used in special situations where we cannot really estimate the force accurately because force depends on time, it changes in time. To solve those problems, that was a kind of a reformulation of Newton's laws for our purpose. And then before that, we also looked at the situation where force was position dependent. So we introduced work and energy. All right, that's more or less where we stand today. So moving on, mostly we have been dealing with translational motion. When an object moves from one point to another point, when a point particle moves from one point to the other point. And in the last chapter, when we considered that an object was no more a point particle, we still kind of got away with introducing a new special point called center of mass. And we said that if we just ignore the rest of the object and if we are not interested in the orientation, there is one special point about every object that behaves like a point particle responding to net external force. Okay, and then it follows very usual trajectories. But let's say now at this stage, we are interested in both the translational motion, how an object goes from one point to the other point. But let's say in the process, if you just consider this chalk is also rotating, right? Chalks are fragile. So if it's also, let's say this is happening on a tabletop and this chalk is going there, but is also rotating. And the outline of this shade kind of indicates the position of its edges, right? So now it's not only translating, but it's also rotating. There is another type of motion that objects can execute, but that is for later, okay? And let's say we are interested in the most general case. So the second type of motion that this object is executing is rotational motion, is rotating as well, okay? Very similar to what we did with the translational kinetics. So that's what we did, translational kinetics. We had position as a function of time, and then we found a relationship using time derivative and another quantity, velocity as a function of time. And then we use again through the time derivative or the differentiation with respect to time, acceleration. All right. That was all the kinematics was all about. And now we have to develop a rotational kinematics. Okay. Rotational kinematics, we have to figure out a quantity which best represents the position or the orientation of a rotating object. Then we have to find out a quantity which represents rate of that rotational position, okay? Rate of change of that rotational position of a rotating object. And then a second rate of change, a rate of change of position, okay? And you can already guess, probably you are not sure what this is, but you can already guess that this is going to be what?
The moment, sir.
Angular velocity, or the rotational velocity, no? And a rotational acceleration. I'll introduce those quantities, okay, in a minute. But you see the analogy. Okay? So we have to find out a reasonable variable that represents the position of a rotating object. Okay, and then we have to find out its rate of change. That would be equivalent of our translational velocity, and then a rate of change of velocity that would give us an equivalent of, for a rotating object, what we call here is acceleration. All right, and just to say a few words about why do we care about rotational motion? Anyone? Well, for one, rotational motion is all around us. So there are many examples in nature. For example, starting from microscopic world, from electrons going around a nucleus to planets going around in a solar system, and the motion of galaxies, and so on and so forth. There's wherever you look, you see examples of rotational motion in nature. And then in man-made universe, you also see a lot of examples of rotation. So the car wheels, the engines. So you see the fan, anything that you look around, a lot of these objects are either moving, are either exhibiting pure rotation or a rotation mixed with translation. Okay. So we begin with introducing the ideas of rotational kinematics, and then we would generalize it. So first, we don't care, we don't worry about what causes the rotations, okay? But then at the end, we would generalize it, and we would see what causes rotations, all right? And then that would be the rotational dynamics. So if you see, let's say, let's consider a point particle moving in a circle. That's an example of rotational motion, okay? So it's going around a fixed point. Although you could still represent its position with R vector, okay? And you can still work out everything, it's totally fine, but it's much more easier, much more convenient if we choose the angle. Let's set the coordinate system. Let's say this is x-axis, positive x-axis, and this is y-axis. A much more convenient, simpler representation of position for an object going in a circle or doing rotational motion is the angle that it makes with the positive x-axis. And the choice is completely arbitrary, but it's quite well respected convention. So in most books, when you see theta, so you always see that this theta is defined with respect to the positive x-axis. Okay. Now, as the object moves, okay, its theta changes in time. So theta as a function of time can be an equivalent of what R does for translational motion. Right? You see, it represents position. So if you know theta as a function of time, you can tell the position of this object at any time. Okay. So that's what it means. That's what it should mean. Now, if you calculate the time rate of change of theta, okay, that would be your rotational or angular velocity, and it's denoted as omega. Right? And then if you take a time rate of change of omega, exactly like we did with the position, velocity, and acceleration. They're related to each other through differentiation, but also through integration. Okay. And this itself is a double derivative of theta with respect to time. Okay. And that is the angular acceleration, okay, or the rotational acceleration, and we denote it with Greek letter alpha. All right. So these are the quantities counterpart to R, V, and A in translational kinematics. So this is rotational kinematics. You can also, for example, you can also express this relationship in the integral form as well, right? So you say omega dt is equal to d theta. Okay, just rearrange the second equation up there. So brought the dt with the omega and write it. And then if you integrate this, okay, if you integrate this, what you get is this d theta minus theta at 0. We call it theta naught, theta at time 0, initial angle, and from t naught to t omega t prime dt prime. All right. So that's the most general relationship between the angular position with the angular velocity. And it's general because even if the velocity is not constant in time, this holds true. Okay. And it's not very different from this. Okay. I'm sure we looked at this. We had this equation somewhere. R naught equals T naught T Vt prime dt prime. Okay. And then if the omega is constant in time, is no more changing, then we can just take it outside of the integration. Okay. And the rest of the integration would be just this dt prime, and that is nothing but omega times t minus dt. Okay. And that is theta t equals theta naught plus omega t minus t naught. Okay. Have you seen this equation before? Something similar before in translational for cases of translational kinematics?
V is equal to U plus AT.
ये u
नहीं
नहीं
सर,
है,
r equals to r naught plus qt plus half at square जैसा नहीं हम इसको कंसिडर कर सकते?
अभी अभी वो नहीं है, वो नहीं, अभी एक्सेलरेशन नहीं है यहाँ पे, ठीक है। ये देखें, लेट मी सिंप्लीफाई, लेट्स से दैट इनिशियल पोजीशन इज 0,
राइट।
ठीक है, and that we start the clock at 0 as well, okay? So क्या हो जाएगा, ये ओमेगा टी हो जाएगा, और ये क्या है, थीटा। ये नहीं आपने किया हुआ, r is equal to vt,
बिल्कुल।
simple. So it's the same thing, it's just it's a fancy way of, you can write this as well like this, r in the vector form, r naught plus v t minus t naught, this equation, okay? So exactly the same. So this is how, for constant velocity case, the position is related to the constant angular velocity, okay, constant angular speed, and this is just the initial angle. All right. Then for constant acceleration case, you can generalize this and write omega t equals omega naught plus alpha t minus t naught, right? So have you seen a similar equation in translational kinematics?
V is equals to U plus AT आ गया।
ये है ना, v is equal to u plus a, ये ज्यादा जनरली तो ऐसे लिखते हैं ना, t minus t naught, but then we take t to 0 and then it looks more simple, and the vector form, of course, plus at. अगर यहाँ भी time 0 ले लें, if you start your clock at 0, then this is omega times omega naught plus alpha t, all right? So just the, but this is only true if you have if the rotational acceleration is constant in time. Otherwise you would have to, otherwise you will have an equation that looks like this, more general equation.
सर ये वाली इक्वेशन हम लोग दोबारा क्यों कर रहे हैं?
Because this is a different equation, isn't it?
Yes, sort of.
Is a completely different equation. The quantities here are different, okay? This is just that it looks very similar, okay? This is linear velocity, okay, linear speed, it's meters per second, and this quantity here, anyone, units?
Radians per second.
Radians per seconds, okay? So this equation, or to say more, let's make it clear for everyone, this is equation for a rotating object, okay? This equation describes the relationship between the angular speed and with the and the angular acceleration for a rotating object, okay? And that is for an object which is moving which is for linear motion, which is exhibiting linear motion, is going in a straight line, or or doing a translational motion, okay? That is why we are doing these equations again, okay? They happen to be just very identical, very analogous, in the other words. And then so you have this equation. I'm just repeating this derivation, although it's very straightforward. so that everyone has the opportunity to catch up or refresh. Theta naught plus T naught to T1 omega T prime T prime. Okay. And now if you plug in what we just wrote on the previous board, T1, if you plug in omega's value in terms of omega naught plus alpha times T minus T naught, all primes, okay, dt prime. And then if you do this integration, assuming that acceleration, this does not depend on time, it's just a constant. Assuming that acceleration also does not depend on time. Okay. And now here, there is a little bit chance of confusion here. Here, this T prime in the parenthesis, omega is a function of T prime. So I changed the notation so that it's clear. And this is a product of T minus T naught. Okay, not a function. Alpha is not a function of time here. That's what is indicating. Okay. Then if you do this integration for constant alpha, you get this relationship plus omega naught T plus half alpha T minus T naught squared. Okay, you can take the T to 0, assume that you start the clock, reset the clock to 0 before starting your observation. Then this becomes half alpha T squared, exactly like the equation that we studied before for R, okay? RT equals R naught plus UT plus half A T squared, okay? But this is again for linear motion, okay? And this is for rotational motion.
सर आप बता सकते हैं कि आप सेकंड वाली लाइन से थर्ड वाली लाइन पे किस तरह आए हैं?
इससे यहाँ पे
हाँ जी
अच्छा देखें, लिनियर है ना, इंटीग्रेशन है, दो टर्म्स हैं, तो इनको सेपरेट इंटीग्रल लिख लें, ठीक है?
बिल्कुल सही है।
और ये यहाँ पे मैंने थोड़ी सी गलती की है. I was bit okay. So this should be omega t minus t naught. ठीक है, तो ये देखें ओमेगा इंटीग्रेशन के बाहर आ जाएगा, तो ये सिंपल ये वाली इंटीग्रेशन आपने की है दोनों टर्म्स में, t नॉट t1 dt, ये इसका इंटीग्रल इस लिमिट्स में होता है t1 माइनस t नॉट. ठीक है,
सर वो तो आई अंडरस्टैंड, लेकिन मुझे ये नहीं समझ आ रहा है कि अल्फा टी माइनस टी नॉट हाफ अल्फा टी माइनस टी नॉट स्क्वायर किस तरह बना है?
आई सी. तो वो देखे ना, वो भी इसकी हाँ, वो इस तरह हाफ स्क्वायर बन जाएगा, क्योंकि ये तो कांस्टेंट नहीं है ना, अल्फा सिर्फ बाहर आएगा ना, ये तो पहले केस में सॉरी आएगा, ये वाली चीज. ये इंटीग्रेशन समझ आ गई ना, ओमेगा नॉट को बाहर निकाल के. यू गेट दिस, पहली टर्म की
सही।
इंटीग्रेशन. अब दूसरी टर्म की इंटीग्रेशन ये होगी, ये इंटीग्रल आपने वैल्यूएट करना है, टी नॉट टू t1 into t prime minus t naught prime dt prime. ठीक है, तो इसका इंटीग्रल जो है वो है हाफ t prime minus t naught squared. ठीक है, so that's how you do.
कि T और T नॉट में डिफरेंस क्या है? और T और T प्राइम के अंदर
T और T प्राइम के अंदर ये डिफरेंस है। T एंड T प्राइम यहाँ पे बोर्ड नहीं है। T एंड T प्राइम के अंदर ये डिफरेंस है, ये डमी वेरिएबल है एक तरह से, ये देखे ना, ठीक, ये T प्राइम है, ठीक है,
सही।
ये एक्सिस है और ये फंक्शन है T प्राइम का, ठीक है।
दूसरे हम इसको इन टर्म्स ऑफ T क्यों नहीं ले रहे और T प्राइम क्यों ले रहे हैं?
बताता हूँ ना, बताता हूँ आपको, ठीक है। अब हमने करनी इसकी इंटीग्रेशन, ठीक है, अच्छा किया आपने पूछ लिया। ये T प्राइम और dt प्राइम के ऊपर इसकी इंटीग्रेशन है, ठीक है। फंक्शन की कोई शेप है, लेट्स से, लेट्स से दिस इज द फंक्शन, ठीक है। तो अब मैं कह रहा हूँ कि मैं किसी स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट से इसकी इंटीग्रेशन शुरू कर रहा हूँ T नॉट से, वो इस एक्सिस पे कहीं भी हो सकता है, ठीक है। तो और किसी अनडिफाइंड डेस्टिनेशन तक इंटीग्रेशन कर रहा हूँ T तक, ठीक है, T नॉट से T तक, ठीक है। तो अब जो मेरा आंसर आएगा ना, एरिया अंडर द कर्व, इट रिमेन्स the function of this main variable T, or both variables T naught and T, because both of them are unspecified. So this area under the curve, this area under the curve,
ठीक।
to keep it as a function of time, I'm playing this trick. Okay, तो ये limits हैं और ये variable है, इसके ऊपर integration हो रही है, but then I'm still keeping the integral now as a function of these limits. तो ये general function बन जाता है itself of time, analytic function है which depends on time, the integral जो इसका जवाब है, area itself is then becomes an analytic function and depends on time. So I can make it simpler, I can set the t to 0, ठीक है, जैसे कि यहाँ किया भी है, और t को मैं undefined रहने देता हूँ. So whenever I'm doing the calculation, I can plug in the value of the t and find the area under the curve from 0 up to that t.
से मुझे ये पॉइंट तो समझ आ गया। माय क्वेश्चन वाज कि आपने यहाँ पे एफ टी प्राइम और डी टी प्राइम यूज किया हुआ है। अगर आप एफ टी और डी टी यूज करते आप ये मतलब इसको एरिया को टाइम फंक्शन एज ए फंक्शन ऑफ टाइम नहीं रिप्रेजेंट कर सकते?
नहीं, फिर देखे ना, उसमें मसला ये ना कि मैंने ये लिमिट भी तो t ली हुई है ना, यू कांट हैव द सेम थिंग हियर एंड हियर, ठीक है ना, ठीक है। तो ये डमी है, t प्राइम खत्म हो जाता है एंड पे, आई एंड अप विद द आंसर t, बट so you have to understand that if I am integrating with respect to t dt, ठीक है, and here I take the value from 0 to y, अब जो मेरा आंसर होगा ना, it would become an analytic function of y,
राइट।
ठीक है ना, क्योंकि ये एरिया अंडर द कर्व जो है, ये y की चॉइस पे अब डिपेंड करता है, whatever value of y you plug in, you will get the bigger area. So it is another function which depends on y. So I want to get another function which depends on t, okay, and I'm choosing a dummy t here, okay, just an auxiliary variable for time to be mathematically consistent, right? And there was one last equation that I wanted to show you about the kinematics. And that was this. And you can obtain it analytically like you do for the translational case. Omega square is equal to omega naught squared plus plus 2 alpha theta minus theta naught. Right? So ये भी है ना, this is equivalent to this equation, right? V squared minus U squared is equal to 2AS, right? ये भी क्यों ही है ना? It's exactly the same thing. You can set the initial angle to be 0. And the rest is exactly the same. So now we have three quantities. The position variable for the position as a function of time for a rotating object or for rotational motion, angular speed or velocity, and angular acceleration. Okay, and their equations of motion. Okay, so you can play with these and you can find relationships. They are not very difficult. They're not very different from exactly what you were doing here. Okay, with acceleration, velocity, position, and time. Any questions so far?
Excuse me, sir, I have a question.
Yes.
Sir, if you remember, हमने rotational motions circular motions जब किए थे, उधर हमने equation बनाई थी sin और cos में position vector के लिए. Sir, I want to ask कि वो कब इस्तेमाल होती है और ये कब इस्तेमाल होती है, इनमें और उसमें difference क्या है?
कोई डिफरेंस नहीं है, वो भी दुरुस्त है और ये भी दुरुस्त है. उसमें दरअसल it's a very good exercise and you should do it that they are equivalent. The both descriptions are equivalent. Okay, ये देखें ना, ठीक है, ये है R, ठीक है. अब कार्टेशियन कोऑर्डिनेट में इस R की क्या है, R ये R है, ठीक है. तो इसका x कोऑर्डिनेट क्या है, R क्या होगा, R कोसाइन थीटा और साइन थीटा. R cosine theta and y is
R sin theta.
R sin theta. अब देखें, if you use position vector as your representation of position, ठीक है ना, for rotational motion, you have to worry about two variables. You're dealing with a vector, ठीक है ना. Although,
yes,
because both variables are changing, x and y are changing in time as this vector rotates. तो ये कार्टेशियन कोऑर्डिनेट्स में हम काम करते हैं वहां पे, और वहां पे फिर ये पोजीशन वेक्टर ऐसे लिख देते हैं, r cosine theta ex प्लस r, ये सिर्फ मैग्नीट्यूड है, r sin theta ey, ठीक है ना. ठीक है, and that gives you the position. Okay, but you see that if you work in r theta coordinate system, instead r and theta, r for the whole part always remains constant, the scalar r, the magnitude of the position vector is always constant. All right, and we can get away with equations for just one variable theta. If you work in Cartesian coordinates, all the equations that I have written, you would have to work with two equations for each set of those equations. Okay, because you would have to write an equation for x and for y. Okay, but here choosing theta as position representation, r is fixed. So I am, instead of having to worry about two variables, okay, I only have to worry about one variable because r is constant. That is why we have different coordinate systems, because depending on the nature of the problem, we choose different coordinate system, and choice of coordinate system can make a very complicated problem, very easy to solve.
Okay. Sir, this means के अगर जो हमने लास्ट टाइम इक्वेशन पढ़ी थी उसमें हमें कोऑर्डिनेट सिस्टम के इतना नहीं होगा, इसमें हमें डिफरेंट इक्वेशंस बनानी पड़ेंगी पर कोऑर्डिनेट. y एक्सिस के लिए अलग, x एक्सिस के लिए अलग, जो हमने अब इक्वेशन इस्तेमाल करनी।
हाँ, अगर आप कार्टेशियन कोऑर्डिनेट चूज करें, लेकिन अगर आप ये पोलर कोऑर्डिनेट चूज करें, r थीटा कोऑर्डिनेट चूज करें, तो देन यू जस्ट एंड हैव इक्वेशंस फॉर थीटा एंड दैट्स इनफ, एंड द टू आर इक्विवेलेंट, दे आर रिलेटेड टू ईच अदर। ओके,
एंड सर वन मोर थिंग सर, जब हमारे रोटेशन के साथ साथ लीनियर मोशन भी होता है, तो लीनियर के फिर हम फ्यूज करेंगे इसके साथ इक्वेशंस रोटेशनल्स के साथ।
जैसे आपके क्विज में क्वेश्चन था ना, when a car is moving, okay,
यस यस
when a car is moving and its tire is rotating, so you
Okay,
can,
sir,
yes,
got it.
you can look at them together. All right. All right, now let's say that we have a rigid rod, okay, of zero mass, okay, and then there is a mass attached to it here, okay, and this part of the rod is fixed. We are using a nail, okay, it's fixed. Let's say this is a top view of this arrangement sitting on a table, okay. All right. Now this is common observation, and you can do this experiment with actually your the door of your room. Is exactly this thing, okay. So if you exert a force at the extreme end of the door like this, you would see that it would produce rotation in this object. It would rotate like this. And you can do this experiment with the door. So that's what we do when we shut the door or we open the door. We put our hand on the handle, which is near the right edge, farthest away from the fixed point. We push on it, and the door rotates, shuts down. It opens or it shuts while rotating along a line, around a line that is where its hinges are, okay, where it is hinged with the wall. Now you can do this experiment at home. What happens if you pull along this line? You exert a force and you pull along this line with the same force that you exerted. What happens then?
The rope might stretch.
No, this is rod, not rope. Okay, it's rigid rod.
Right.
Sir,
And let's say that it's strong enough that you can't break it. So it won't move. Eh? Nothing happens. So with this depiction, what I'm trying to motivate is the agency behind rotation. Okay, what causes rotation? We are looking for a counterpart of force in linear motion. Okay, so nothing happens. How about if you push the force like this along this direction?
Nothing happens.
Okay, let's say that you exert the force here.
कुछ भी नहीं होगा.
At any direction. Okay. Okay. Let's say that you exert the force here.
The door will move. Other force चाहिए होगी.
Movement होगी, but slowly.
Slowly. Yes. Very good. So, and if you plug if you put the force here, then
तो sir और भी वो
slow हो जाएगा.
move करे.
Yes.
Exactly.
And if you go further away from the point of rotation, at the extreme edge, that is where you would get the maximum rotation, right? Okay, let's do another example. Let's say that you apply the force here somewhere, but at an angle. इस तरह से force लगाएं तो क्या होगा? Let's say that let me make two pairs of forces. Okay, you exert the same magnitude force in this direction and in this direction. So what happens? First of all, would both forces produce motion or no?
Yes.
They will.
They would.
Yes.
They would. One of them would produce smaller motion, smaller quantity of motion, slower motion, and the other would produce faster. Okay, right? So I've covered all possible situations that you can think of, and the lesson is that it seems that force is what produces rotation, but that's not the complete story, right? There has to be more detail to this picture. Does it convince you?
Yes, sir.
For example, for translational motion, you had this relationship. You apply an amount of force F on an object, okay, and it produces mass scaled by a motion or acceleration in that object scaled by the mass of that object. There was nothing more involved here. Okay? But that is not the case here, you see. The force is necessary and seems to be the agency that is producing motion, rotation, let's say, not motion, sorry, rotation. Okay, produces motion definitely, stand alone, but it can't produce rotation because it depends on where you are applying the force. Okay, which position you're applying the force, one, which angle the force is being applied. Okay, with respect to the, let's say, the position vector of the rotating object, R. So let's say that we already have the quantity. So the force or whatever agency that produces rotational motion, okay, would be actually producing what? The rotational acceleration, no? And the rotational acceleration, it's very clear that it's proportional to the magnitude of the force. You can do that experimentally, you can observe it, okay? Bigger the force, here, let's say, produces more acceleration, rotational acceleration. Smaller the force produces small acceleration at this point. Okay. Then I shouldn't write it proportional because the other quantities. So let's say that it's related to the magnitude of the force. The rotational acceleration is also related to the distance from the axis of rotation. Okay, depending on where you apply the force, it produces more acceleration, rotational acceleration, or smaller rotational acceleration. So two quantities, and the third quantity is that the rotational acceleration is related to is the angle between R. Let's say that this is R, and angle between R and F, the force that you are applying. For example, when this angle is 180 between R and F, no rotation acceleration. When this angle is 0, again, no motion. When this angle is 90, that is when you get the maximum force in terms of the angle, okay? Regardless of where else you're putting the force. Let's say you're putting the force at finite distance from the point of rotation and you have a fixed magnitude, then the maximum acceleration you would get is when F is perpendicular to R. Okay, three quantities. So then it seems it's a reasonable choice that that if we write that whatever agency that produces, let's call it tau, is equal to the perpendicular force times the distance from the axis of rotation where this force is being applied. Okay. And we say that it is not the force that produces the rotation, but this new quantity, okay? And you see it's different from force. And it in itself has embedded all these observations that we have made here, right? And the perpendicular component of force can be written as F sine theta, if theta is the angle between them. So then this is FR sine theta. Okay. Now this has all these three ingredients: the magnitude of the force, the magnitude of the distance from the point of rotation or the axis of rotation to where the force is being applied, and the angle between the force and the position, or the R. All right. Now you can check when theta is 0, sine 0, there would be no. So let's say that this quantity is 0, okay, which means this is the counterpart of force, no rotational acceleration. So we are defining this new quantity. Okay. Okay. So what is the so can I write this in a more general way? FR sine theta. Are you familiar with something? For example, you know that when A dot B, the inner product or vector product, or sorry, dot product between two vectors is what? A, B, cosine theta. What about the cross product between two vectors? No idea? Cross product of two vectors is magnitude of vector 1, magnitude of vector 2, and sine of the angle between them. Okay. So if you want to promote this equation to be a vector equation, and then this quantity to be a vector, we can write F cross R. Okay. And that is what we call torque. I hope that you're convinced with its definition, that it has all those observations built into the equation. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. So, but we haven't really gotten anything similar to what Newton's second law is, right? We have found the definition of this thing in terms of the force and position vector, but we haven't really found this being related to the rotational acceleration. That is the objective, okay? We have to find something that looks like Newton's second law, okay? Where the agency that causes motion, which we now know is torque, okay, or we have just defined as torque, okay, is related to the rotational acceleration alpha. So we have to find a relationship between alpha and tau. Let's find that out. So again, let's say the same object that we were considering, okay? Let's say that in a small amount of time dt, it makes a small angle d theta, okay? It subtends a small angle d theta, all right? Now, do you know the relationship? If the length is r, what is this distance? If I call it
R
ds.
into d theta.
G?
R into d theta.
Yes. So ds, that distance, small distance, ds is nothing but r d theta. Okay. Now let's take a time derivative of this, okay, or divide it everything by dt. I mean, it would be meaningless to take derivative of r because r is a constant in time. Okay, so that term would be 0 if you were taking the derivative actually and worrying about this term. Okay, and let's take another derivative of this. Okay, another derivative of this, ds squared over dt square. First of all, what is this quantity now?
Linear acceleration.
Linear acceleration. Very good. Translational or linear acceleration. And d squared theta over dt squared. Okay, what is this quantity here? D squared
Rotational acceleration.
angular acceleration. Shabash. So this is r alpha and this is a. So we found a relationship between a and alpha. Okay, they're not the same, you see. Okay, so now we bring back the definition of tau, and I'm just using the special case where force is acting perfectly perpendicularly to the position r and just writing the scalar form of tau. Okay, but it's general, the relationship. So that is what we said, right? If the angle between them is 90 degree, then it's simply in scalar form, tau is f times r. Okay, and f is MAR, right? F is MA. Let's say the M is the mass of the ball attached to the rod. Okay. And now plug in the value of A from this equation. So what do we get? M R alpha R, right? Or M R squared alpha. Okay. Now let me rewrite this here. F equals just scalar form first. Okay. We can generalize it to later. Mass times acceleration. Okay. And torque, acceleration, and mr square. Do you see similarity between the two? I just did this derivation, okay, here, by finding a relationship between A and alpha. So this is the agency, the torque, which produces rotational or angular acceleration. And this quantity here plays the same role which mass plays in Newton's second law. Okay. Mass resists the translational motion, okay, change in the state of the object. That's a measure of inertia of a body, right? This is the measure of rotational inertia of a body, because it's multiplied with the acceleration. And that is why it is called moment of inertia. What is it called? This quantity. So we define a new quantity and write the equation I alpha tau, where I is m r squared. Okay. And if you carefully look, this has two pieces of information in it. The mass and how the mass of an object is distributed throughout the body of that object. Okay, so it takes into account the mass distribution and the shape of the object, and that's why. And then that's why when we plug this in, the rotational motion depends. The rotation of an object depends on its shape and depends on, of course, its total mass, but it also depends on how its mass is distributed across its body. Okay. And that quantity for it, and it's not the same. This expression is not always the same. It depends. It changes shape to shape. Okay, different shapes, different objects would have different answer, exactly like center of mass. The difference is that center of mass can be negative. This quantity can never be negative. Mass times r square is always positive. Okay, and this is the measure of resistance to rotational motion. So rotational inertia. Okay, and this is the counterpart, the rotational counterpart of Newton's second law. This is the agency, the torque, which produces rotational motion, rotational acceleration, and this is the quantity which resists rotational motion. Any questions so far? Another important difference between I and M is that M is an intrinsic property. Okay? Mass of an electron. This electron has this mass and would always have this mass, and it doesn't depend on its shape, doesn't change. Mass of an atom, for example, or mass of an object is an intrinsic property. Okay, this is not an intrinsic property, the moment of inertia. It depends on how different objects are organized, how mass is organized in a different object. And then it would break down if the bodies were not rigid. Okay, if while rotating an object was also stretching and wobbling, okay, were changing its shape, then moment of inertia, you can't define it. And once you can't define it, then this whole thing would not work. So this whole framework that we developed today only works for rigid bodies. Okay.
Excuse me, sir. I had a question. आपका जो ये rotation जो object की होती है, वो mass पे भी dependent होती है और distribution of mass और shape पे, वो surface area पे dependent होगी of an object. मतलब अगर एक छोटा सा disk है of mass m और एक बहुत बड़ी disk है उसका भी mass m है, तो उससे वो affect होगा?
क्योंकि उसमें mass की distribution different है, लेकिन वो surface area का तो उसके साथ as such कोई ताल्लुक नहीं है.
सर एरिया ज्यादा हो जाएगा ना. इफ आई एम टेकिंग अ स्मॉल डिस्क, उसका मास और एक बड़ी डिस्क उसका मास सेम है.
Yes, but it's careless language to say it depends on surface area. Okay, a more careful language would be that its mass distribution and its size is different. It depends on size is more general word language to use. Okay. Okay. Because if you can have a hollow shell with a larger surface area. Okay, what is the difference between a shell and a hollow object? I don't know. What is the word for that? Between a shell and a sphere of just a thin metal sheet.
Right.
So the one with the filled mass would have a different moment of inertia, and the one with the other one may have the larger. For example, let's say if you have a solid shell. That's what I was trying to say. You have a solid shell, a sphere filled with mass, and then if you have a hollow shell much bigger, now can you say with confidence which one would have more moment of inertia? No, you'd have to calculate it.
Right. तो सर इसमें हम ये कह सकते हैं कि अगर दोनों का मास इनके सेम भी होता है तो जो आपका फील्ड है उसका तो सेंटर ऑफ मास सेंटर में होगा, लेकिन शेल का प्रॉब्ली शायद सेंटर में ना हो शायद.
नहीं, अगर but this is not related to the center of mass. The moment of inertia is a different thing. Okay.
Okay.
All right. And you can't really say unless you actually calculate the exact distribution of mass and you actually calculate this quantity. Okay. And I'll write a more general form of this. Okay.
Okay.
Well, let me just write it here so that we conclude this discussion. So what happens is, let's assume a very irregular object. So let's say that you have something that looks like this. Okay. And you fix it. And it also depends where the point of rotation as well. Moment of inertia depends if the object. So let's say that you have a flat metal sheet sitting on the top of a table and you nail it here. Okay. Now that would be the axis of rotation. So if you exert force here, Now, in principle, this is how you do it. So the calculation that we did, we cheated because we again did that for a point particle. When you have to apply that calculation to an object like this, you do the old way. Okay, so you say that this is a small point here. Okay, and it has small mass dm. All right, and it has distance r from the point of rotation. Okay, and then some force is acting on it. Okay, and then to describe the rotation of this object, so you would do this for, so you want to actually calculate this I alpha, but first you want to calculate, but just for that particle. Okay, and then, so let's say that that is ith particle. Okay, and it has, its position is Ri squared dm. Okay, and then to calculate the moment of inertia of every point in such an object, you must sum it, right? Okay. Sum over I. So then if you take the limit, and this would be the total inertia of the object on the left side, and then if you take the limit dm to be very, very small, then this becomes r squared dm. That is the general relationship. Okay, so for every object, you must first calculate this integral. All right. Now, one last bit that I want to finish with today is this. That if you remember, we generalized the Newton's law, the force being related to time rate of change of linear momentum. Right? This relationship we did, right? The time rate of change of linear momentum is equal to force. Now we have the agency that causes rotation, and we have to find an equivalent quantity whose time rate of change is equal to force, is equal to torque. Okay, and let's say that that quantity for now I denoted with L. All right. Okay, and let's heuristically define this L to be R cross P. Okay. R the position vector, and P the linear momentum. The cross product of those two I propose would be that quantity which give us this relationship analogous to this relationship. Okay, so let's show that this happens. Let's take a time derivative of L. Okay, we take a time derivative of the cross product. Let's learn how to do the time derivative of a cross product. Okay, nothing very special. The simple product rule. dr over dt times p plus r cross dp over dt. Right? And then what is dr over dt? Quantity that you're familiar with?
Velocity.
Velocity. So then this becomes v cross p plus r cross. And what is dp by dt?
Force.
Force. All right. Okay. But what is the definition of P? mv, right? So can I write V equals P over M? Can I do that?
Yeah.
P is equal to mv and v equals to p over m. So I substitute that here. So I write v p over m cross p plus r cross f. All right. So what about this quantity? Anyone?
So ये p
Zero
square
नहीं
over m.
ये क्रॉस प्रोडक्ट है between two vectors.
जीरो
Right.
Zero. Cross product between the vectors themselves, a vector between a vector itself or with a vector itself, sorry, is zero. So what are we left with? R cross F. Okay. Remember,
sir, ये आप बता सकते हैं कि ये जीरो किस तरह इक्वेट हो गया p over m into p?
two vectors, the cross product of vector with itself is zero. Like,
तो p into p तो नहीं हो रहा है, इसमें p into p over m हो रहा है ना? तो p over m is
but
different from p.
that's a scalar, just I can take it outside. Yeah. और वैसे भी, if you multiply a vector by a scalar, it remains a vector in the same direction. So a vector
में
भी ये देखें,
property
ये
कभी
देखें,
सुना है ये cross product?
कोई बात नहीं, लेकिन ये देखें, क्रॉस प्रोडक्ट बिटवीन ए वेक्टर A and its scaled version, let's say 2A, is always zero as well. Okay? The beauty of vectors. Okay? Or half A, cross product between A and half A would also be zero. So 1 over m is not doing anything, it's just making this piece smaller, but it remains in the same direction. Two vectors in the same direction, their cross product is zero. So even if it is one unit vector Ex and a vector in the x direction, their cross product would be zero. Although one is only 1 unit length, another can be 100 units. ठीक है?
Right. Okay.
So remember what we started with. We started with the time derivative of this new quantity that we defined as L cross P. It turns out equal to what? R cross F. Isn't that our definition of the torque? So what did we learn then? That dl over dt is equal to torque. In the same spirit as dp over dt is equal to force. Okay, time rate of change of linear momentum. So what is then this L?
angular momentum.
Angular momentum. Okay, so time rate of change of angular momentum is torque. You must be wondering, why do we introduce these abstract quantities like angular momentum or linear momentum? Well, there are other useful aspects of them, but the most important one of them is that these are conserved quantities. Okay, and having conserved quantities in your equations and while solving problems makes the problems solving incredibly simple. Okay, and on top of that, these are experimentally measurable quantities. They're not completely abstract. So you can watch videos, people demonstrating that how the rate of change of angular momentum produces torque, or torque produces rate of change of angular momentum. So if an object is rotating, okay, it has certain angular momentum, and you can see that the direction of angular momentum is out of the plane of rotation, r cross f. Okay, the resultant vector would be, if r is pointing in this direction and f is pointing in this direction, then the angular momentum direction would be this, simply the right hand thumb rule. Okay, let me just explain you very quickly. So if this is r and this is force, how do you determine the direction of the angular momentum? Well, this is how you determine. Okay, you place your hand along r, okay, your fingers, then curl them into the direction of the force, okay, and then your thumb should be pointing, and you should be doing this with your right hand. Your thumb would be pointing the direction of the angular momentum, and that is also true for cross product between any two vectors. Okay, if you want to find the direction of the resultant vector, cross product of two vectors gives you a vector. Okay, so if you're looking at the cross product of two vectors and you want to find out the direction of the resultant vector, it would always be orthogonal to the plane that these two vectors live in, like this R and F. All right, and angular momentum is a very useful quantity. Those of you who would take chemistry in the following years and as your career progresses, or take physics or probably other disciplines as well, would appreciate its importance. It appears in spectroscopy. It appears in understanding atomic structure of matter, molecules, their spectrum, their spectroscopy. It's a very useful quantity. It's best that you understand and internalize the concept. What is angular momentum? And again, I'm saying it's a conserved quantity. And this being conserved, it makes problem solving very simple. With this, thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take. So the next two lessons won't be